very personal talk anyway, and just to be even more appropriate than ever. Autumn is a strange time for me. I don't know if anybody else shares that. Some people have trouble with the holidays or with the spring. All of my severe challenges have happened in the autumn and fall. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this coming week, I will observe the anniversary of what I call my conscious participation in my own recovery. My first AA meeting, to be specific. And that will have been 44 years ago.
Wow.
44 years. It's impossible for me to believe that, because it's still possible for me to look back and not only remember, but actually feel what I was feeling at that time, I didn't think I was going to stay, I didn't plan to stay more than a few days, Later on, when I was still coming around and they started talking about meetings over the holidays, and I thought, my God, they're going to not drink over the holidays? I thought we sort of disband and then regroup again. I really didn't get the concept too well. But my life had just spun out of control, and the last step of that was physical. My body just collapsed and said, we're not doing this anymore. And I spent several weeks in the hospital, and then in a recovery unit where I was forced to go to AA meetings, but I sat in the back, and with all of my arrogance, I just felt I do not belong here. I am above all of this somehow. And when they left, I literally remember saying to my sponsor there, well, if I'm ever near a church basement, I'll stop in and say hello, but I really don't need the program because I'm an intelligent person, and I would just remember what I've been through, and that'll do it. And he looked at me and he said, no one has ever frightened an alcoholic sober. And indeed, within 24 hours, because I left and I was back into the same environment that I had been in before, and these were people who drank and did drugs. And it wasn't 24 hours later that I was seriously considering joining them. And I thought, wait a minute, this is absurd. I went to the phone, I picked up the phone and I called headquarters to find out where there was an AA meeting near me. And there was one about a mile away, and I was staying on Long Island at the time. I walked there, walked around the church, because of course it was in the church, several times, and finally went in, crept to the back, and just sat down and thought, oh, okay, I'm here, so do something. Well, people were milling around and didn't seem to be coming to any kind of order, and they were wearing masks and costumes, and I thought, okay, I know it's an anonymous program, but isn't this kind of carrying it to extremes? And the kind lady came over and saw me sitting there by myself and said, could I help you? And I said, well, I'm here for the AA meeting. And she said, oh, honey, there's no meeting this week. This is the church Halloween party. And I walked back home. But just my willingness to go somehow carried me through, and the next day I called and somebody picked me up and went to my first meeting. And at that meeting, that was in Great Neck, at that meeting a gentleman was saying that he almost drank that day because he was having such a difficult time getting his boat into dry dock. Now, I'm sitting there with like 74 cents to last the rest of my life, as far as I knew. And my problems were not remotely like that, but I instantly identified. And at that first meeting, I knew that I was home. I wish I could say it was happily ever after from then on, but that wouldn't be true. The first couple of years of my sobriety were at least as painful, and probably more so, as my last 2 years of active use. Because it's a very, I won't say it's a long process, but it is a process. How long it is depends on how resistant we are, and I was very resistant, but for a long time. but it is not something, it's not a question of, I've been thinking this week about darkness and light. Darkness and light. You know, you can't just walk out of the darkness and into the full light. You'd go blind and you wouldn't be able to cope. You know, it's a process. It's like the Lotus Sutra version, the Buddhist version of the story of the prodigal son, in which, in that version, he goes mad while he's in the, feeding the pigs. And he just wanders the countryside like one of those mad beggars, just out of his logical mind, and he comes accidentally to his father's land, and his father recognizes him, but knows in the instant that he can't tell him, you are my son and this is all yours. He couldn't cope with it at all. So he brings him in, he lets him be a servant in the fields, and then as he gets healthier and healthier, to become a servant in the house, and more responsibility, until he's finally to a point where he can stand to hear and understand the fact that, in fact, all of this is his. I just love that version of the story, because that's so much my truth.
Right.
You know, it's just a process of as much light as I can handle on any given day. And there's a great value, and this took me a long time to realize, there's a great value in the darkness, people. You know? It's not that I'm in the dark and I've got to get into the light. It's I'm into the dark and I've got to figure out what this is about. You know?
Right.
I'm not here to live in the light. If I were going to just live in the light, I wouldn't have to incarnate into these bodies. I'm here to experience duality, and that means experience the darkness as well as the light. My favorite contemporary theologian, Richard Rohr, Franciscan monk, talked this week about the difference between spiritual darkness and stupidity darkness. I think that's a rather extreme word, but I know what he means. I would call it maybe insanity darkness, if by insanity we mean the tendency to repeat the same thing time after time, expecting different results. And that is a darkness indeed, that is of our own making, so it is our choice and our decision to release it, to let it go. But that spiritual darkness is very important. It's important that we get comfortable with the dark. It's important, I mean, the height of my recovery, I think, wasn't realizing that I no longer think about drugs and alcohol. I don't particularly, but realizing that if I do, I can handle it. You know, the darkness is still there. There's still those thoughts in my head that say, "Don't you think it'd be a good idea to, you know, have a drink about this, or to smoke a cigarette about it?" That's the other thing. You know, wouldn't this be better if we had a cigarette? And I've been off cigarettes for 42 years, and it's still there. You know, those thoughts are still there. But I don't panic about them anymore. I don't think there's something wrong with me because I'm hanging on to those thoughts. I understand that those thoughts have a place there. And it's about saying, thank you for sharing, but I think I'll make another choice. So spiritual darkness is the darkness out of which everything comes. It's the darkness at the beginning of the book of Genesis. It's the darkness at the beginning of the book of John, the Gospel of John. You know, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And light came to the darkness, and the darkness received it not. So darkness is a part of how Spirit expresses for us. Darkness is a part of our journey. Our purpose, our reason for being here in these bodies. Don't you sometimes wonder, what the hell am I doing in this body? Our reason for being here is to create the kingdom of heaven, what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven, a new level of consciousness from which we will be choosing from our Christ essence rather than choosing from ego input. And that will become more and more comfortable and more natural, and it is doing that now, whether you're aware of it or not, but you know you are making significant progress on your path, don't you think? Yeah, I think maybe you wouldn't be here this morning if you weren't. That's just, a given. You know, we're on the path. That's one of the things that I so appreciate about any unity gathering, really, is that it's a sign that we're beginning to awaken. And when we look at the world around us, it is very easy to fall into duality and to say, oh my God, there's so much darkness. How can I cope with this darkness? Or how can I be light with all this darkness around me? And the answer is that darkness cannot threaten you in any way. It will never extinguish your light. So all you can do, what you can do, is be the light. And not try to change all of the darkness, and certainly not judging the darkness and saying, oh, it's evil. Evil is ignorance, Charles Fillmore told us. Sin is ignorance. It's not that we're deliberately choosing to make unhealthy choices, it's that we're ignorant of what they are. And we genuinely believe that we need to make this choice, or we want to make this choice because it will work out for us, instead of the spiritual awareness that allows us to make better choices. So seeing evil in the world is important. Being the light that shines in that evil is extremely important. You will never, ever imagine the power of your light. You don't get to experience that. None of us does. But our light has a tremendous effect in the darkness. It shines, and it joins with other lights, not just here in this room, but around the world. There are people this morning who are affirming the light, who are choosing to live in the light, to be the light, to share the light with others. And that is true, that you don't need to make any changes in the world around you for that to be true. You know, I used to, when I was drinking, I drank through Watergate, for one thing. Those of you who are old enough to remember Watergate. And I would watch the television every day and watch this disaster unfold. And I would drink, and that was my excuse was, well, you know, Watergate. Why anybody would drink if, you know, if they had Nixon as president. I was very opinionated. Then Nixon resigned, and the Watergate was resolved, and I was still drinking, and I had to think, well, no, wait a minute. I've got to rethink this. But it's always easy to find a reason around me, you know, why I can't be the light at this moment, because there's something going on in my life, or there's something going on in the world that violates the light, that gets in the way of the light. There never is. Yeah. There are things going on in my life, and they are things inviting me to approach them with the light, to be the light in those situations, to be the light in the world. And sometimes it feels totally inadequate, doesn't it? Like that doesn't feel like my light is going to accomplish anything. But of course it is, because you're an infinite spiritual being. We're all of one divine consciousness. So it's like, I used to, when I was teaching Course in Miracles, I used to say it's like one cell waking up. You know, it can't get up and go for coffee, but it can start to awaken the cells around it. And bit by bit, you know, an arm awakens and a body awakens, and we're awake to the truth of who we are. But it begins with each of us knowing who we are, being who we are, and feeling complete in that, not feeling frustrated in it. You know? So that's my sharing for this week, is just my appreciation of the amazing, astonishing, unbelievable path that has carried me through these 44 years. I think if anybody had told me when I first stopped drinking that I was eventually going to become a minister, I'd gone back to drinking. That would be reasonable enough by itself. Unfortunately, Spirit doesn't show us the longer journey. You know, it's enough to. It's a day at a time. There's a phrase. Oh, we should copyright that. It is literally a day at a time. You know, how can I be the light in this day? How can I be the light in the face of these shadows? How can I not allow the shadows to frighten me, to overwhelm me, to make me feel weak or inadequate. How can I be the light? And boy, I mean, for me, it has been a long process, still going on, of course. It always will, it still will be going on as long as I'm still wearing this earth suit, and maybe beyond, who knows, I have no idea. But it is enough to know that I am the light. If I can wake up each morning and know that I am the light, and be that light, and feel that light, expressing just in the simplest choices I make, you know, my attitude toward Sean in the morning, my attitude toward my dog, Bentley, my attitude toward breakfast, everything. You know, I can get up in a bad mood and be irritated by there are dishes in the sink, and there shouldn't be dishes in the sink. I like to come out in the morning and have no dishes in the sink. There are dishes in the sink. Oh my God, this day is going to go to hell. It's going to be a terrible day. You ever have those things?
Yes.
One little thing goes wrong in the morning. You're like, oh, I give up. This is going to be a horrible day. And of course, what happens? It's a horrible day. Not because that was waiting for you, but because you created it. And you ever said, okay, you want a horrible day? I'll give you a horrible day. You can't even imagine how horrible this day can be. It's the first choice in the morning. You know, I wish when I open my eyes, my Christ energy would immediately say how beautiful this day is and how fortunate I am to be alive and how much I love this body and this opportunity to wake up and experience another day. But my ego self is sitting on the bedpost, and it's the one that talks the loudest. And it's the one that says, you're late, you're already late, it's going to be a rotten day. You know, you might as well go back to bed because you're already late, and so nothing's going to happen. Right? And you know that's good. And outlines everything that's going to go wrong all day. And I can buy into that, or I can simply resist it, not oppose it, not fight it, but simply say thank you for sharing. I think I'll be the light. You know, I think I'll trust the light instead. But that thank you for sharing is very important.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
it's like what I learned when I first got sober is I'm saying, okay, that part of me that addiction part of me is still going to be with me, but it can't be in the driver's seat anymore. I simply say to it, sit in the back seat, play nice, and thank you for sharing. I think I'll make another choice. I think I'll let my spirit self drive the bus. Yeah. So let's drive our buses this week and see where they take us. Remembering each morning when we wake up, just to start. The easiest way to access spirit, I find, is appreciation. My friend Doc Childre, who founded HeartMath, says that is the most powerful energy on the planet. Simple appreciation, doesn't have to be passionate love or focused love or spiritual love. Just I appreciate. I appreciate where I am, who I am. I appreciate the people in my life. And I appreciate my dog who gets on my nerves because he sheds all over the place. I appreciate all of this. And out of that appreciation comes the light. And out of that light comes a life that is rich and powerful and productive. Out of that appreciation comes my contribution to the collective consciousness, which is transforming the world. That's my sharing. So many blessings to you this week as you awaken each day in appreciation and appreciate the light. Blessings.